The Doctor Who TV movie lives in infamy among Doctor Who fans. It was a complete bomb upon release in America, but it actually has an extremely interesting and chaotic history behind it, including brushes with Hollywood's elite such as Steven Spielberg. But what went wrong with this movie? Why did it do so badly? And why did Sting almost play the Doctor? Buckle up, because this is going to be a long one. Our story begins in the year 1989. Michael Keaton was Batman, Indiana Jones fought Nazis again, and Madonna was dominating the charts. It was a busy year for the world. The Berlin Wall came down, George Bush Sr. became the President of Americas, and nothing at all happened in Tiananmen Square. Nothing at all. But hey, the Game Boy and Sega Genesis came out. But whilst all of this was happening, Columbia Pictures Director of Drama Development Philip Segal had started work to bring Doctor Who to the land of freedom. Segal wanted to negotiate a deal between the BBC and an American company to create a new Doctor Who series, but as we all know, this never ended up happening. At the turn of the 90s, the BBC cancelled Doctor Who after its 26th season, and they didn't want anything to do with the show anymore, declining Segal's proposals. Segal was persistent though. After he moved to Steven Spielberg's production company Amblin Entertainment, Segal was joined in his pursuits by Peter Wagg, the producer of Max Headroom. It was now 1992 and there was still no sign of an American Doctor Who series. However, the new controller of BBC One, Alan Yentob, was now responsible for the very output of the BBC's flagship channel, and he was a Doctor Who fan. Despite finally having someone on the inside, Segal's plans were hindered by the presence of Universal Television, who were one of Amblin's primary backers. Universal and BBC Enterprises were both standing firm and trying to negotiate a deal in each of their best interests. It essentially became a bit of a tug of war over the budget and creative approval. During 1993, letters were passing back and forth, with the BBC demanding a get-out clause in case Segal, Wagg or Spielberg lost interest in the project. Similarly, Amblin wanted complete script control and total distribution rights in North America on all series and movie versions they produced. Everyone wanted a bigger slice of the pie than they could cut. An agreement between all parties was finally agreed on January 13th, 1994, nearly 5 years after Segal's project had begun. However, there was one major problem. Due to the nature of American TV, Segal and Wagg needed to have the series ready to pitch to networks in time for autumn of that same year, giving them just 2 months breathing room. The race was on. Universal told Segal that he needed a studio writer, suggesting John Leakley, who had penned episodes of Miami Vice and the TV film Knight Rider 2010. Despite being against using a writer from Universal, Segal reluctantly agreed, not wanting to waste time by fighting with the company. With the help of designer Richard Lewis, Segal and Leakley created an extensive and detailed series bible called The Chronicles of Doctor Who. This was meant to outline the series and introduce it to potential buyers and writers of the show, with general plot points and story concepts. Leakley and Segal wanted to completely reboot Doctor Who, rather than continue on from season 26. This series bible is truly fascinating. It outlines a story where the Doctor is half human, and the Master is his half-brother. The pair are the grandchildren of Cardinal Barusa, the President of the Time Lords. When Barusa dies, the Master becomes President, sending his robotic spider-like henchmen, the Daleks, after the Doctor, who escapes in an old TARDIS, which has become possessed by the dead Barusa. The main arc of the series would be about the Doctor searching for his father, the Time Lord adventurer Ulysses, in order to stop the Master. The series bible goes on to detail the general adventures of the series. These were all largely based on serials from the original run of Doctor Who. These included a story inspired by Genesis of the Daleks where the Master kills Davros to gain control of the Daleks, a remake of Earthshock set in Wyoming, a remake of The Smugglers set in Spain, and a remake of The Talons of Weng-Chiang set in New York. Other potential episodes outlined were remakes of The Abominable Snowman, Tomb of the Cybermen, Horror of Fang Rock, The Celestial Toymaker, The Gunfighters, and The Ark in Space. The Bible ended with the final adventure, where the Doctor finds Ulysses and returns to Gallifrey to defeat the Master and become President. Leakley began to flesh out some of the planned episodes, whilst Segal and Wag began trying to cast their lead role. By February, huge lists of potential actors had been compiled by casting agents John and Ross Hubbard. These lists included names such as Rowan Atkinson, Sean Bean, Pierce Brosnan, Peter Capaldi, Tim Curry, Timothy Dalton, Michael Gambon, John Hurt, Ian McKellen, and Patrick Stewart. Names put forward for the role of Barusa included Peter Cushing, Alec Guinness, Anthony Hopkins, and Christopher Lee. On the 9th of March, auditions for the lead role were held for a number of the shortlisted actors. By this point, the favourite was Irish actor Liam Cunningham, but he seemed unavailable. One of the other names discussed as an alternative was a relatively popular and rising actor by the name of Paul McGann. After writing the series Bible, the plan was to convince one of the American networks to agree to a pilot movie, followed by a season of 22 episodes, each running for 45 minutes. Towards the end of March, the show Bible began circulation around the 4 major American networks: ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS. Both ABC and NBC immediately passed on the series. However, CBS president Peter Tortorici was actually interested in the show. Segal believed that he could secure a 2-hour pilot and 6 one-hour episodes with the network. Despite this optimism, CBS started ghosting Segal and his team, and it transpired that CBS head Howard Stringer had overruled Tortorici and turned down the project. This left Fox as the last chance for Segal's Doctor Who. At this time, Fox was the youngest American network. Despite being interested in the show, the network only wanted a 2-hour movie, with the possibility of a second. This was far from the full series Segal had been trying to make. On June 28th, Fox finally ordered a Doctor Who TV movie, promising Segal that it would lead to a full series if the ratings were good enough. Now that the movie was on the verge of happening, Segal brought in Doctor Who historian Jean-Marc Lofficier and his wife Randy as unofficial consultants on the film. Their job was to advise the production team on Doctor Who continuity and serve as a liaison with the Doctor Who fan community. Wanting a representative in the production, the BBC had also sent Joe Wright to the production team, a move that surprised and dismayed Segal. On July 25th, Leakley submitted his first story proposal, using a lot of the content from his series Bible. However, he had now added a companion, American WAC Lizzie Travis, who would meet the Doctor in World War II London. It was now hoped that filming could start in November, with a May release date, before filming the potential series the following July. However, the project was about to be hit with another big setback, from a very unlikely source. Even though the BBC and Fox were together in their approval of Leakley's script, Steven Spielberg himself stepped in. Spielberg thought that the script was not funny enough and was too similar to his own Indiana Jones franchise. So on September 26th, he told Segal to start again with a brand new writer, delaying principal photography until at least February 1995. Segal wasted no time in approaching writer Robert De Laurentiis to write the film. De Laurentiis made significant changes, making the script more focused and fun. He also removed Barusa's presence as a TARDIS spirit and resolved the search for Ulysses in the film itself, although he also gave Lizzie a bulldog sidekick named Winston, and wrote a storyline where Ulysses was captured leading an American squadron to assassinate Adolf Hitler. This new outline was submitted on October 7th, just over a week after Spielberg demanded the rewrites. Segal was understandably uneasy about De Laurentiis' direction, but he allowed De Laurentiis to proceed to the drafting stages. The resulting script was submitted on December 17th, removing Winston and giving the Doctor another, alien companion named Gog. Both the BBC and Fox became unhappy with this script, especially the BBC, who were concerned by De Laurentiis' decision to reimagine the hugely popular Daleks as shape-shifting humanoids. After constant back and forth about the script, De Laurentiis left the project in February 1995, once again leaving the movie without a usable script and without a writer. Still seeking a writer, Segal and Wag turned to the British-born writer Matthew Jacobs, who began working on the script on May 5th of 1995. It was decided to start completely fresh, cutting almost all of the material created by both Leakley and De Laurentiis. Jacob wanted to appeal to Fox's younger demographics by avoiding settings in the past and aliens such as the Daleks, although the Master would remain, along with the plot point of the Doctor having a human mother. Jacobs also pushed for the movie to link explicitly to the classic series, including an on-screen regeneration of the Seventh Doctor. Segal had previously been against these kinds of links, but he now accepted Jacobs' idea, possibly out of desperation to just get on with the project. On May 19th, Jacobs delivered his first rough storyline, beginning with the Seventh Doctor arriving in modern-day America. Many other elements from this outline remained in the final script, such as the Doctor regenerating in the morgue and the inclusion of Grace Holloway and Chang Li, albeit under different names. However, this version of the story was also set around Halloween, with the Master using the TARDIS to unleash an army of the dead. This was removed in the next draft, with the setting becoming San Francisco on New Year's Eve. Despite the good progress being made, Peter Wagg left the production, choosing to return to his family back in London. Wagg offered to keep in touch with Segal and occasionally help remotely, but this is just like when someone breaks up with you and says, maybe we can still be friends? Jean-Marc and Randy L'Officier would also soon leave the project, now that their advisory role had ended. Jacobs would continue to work on drafts, but more important things were happening on Segal's side of the production. Towards the end of summer, Segal was planning November as a filming date, with British Columbia being the base of operations. Segal had now begun to prefer the idea of regular television movies, rather than the series he had been aiming for since 1989. At the turn of September, Universal added their own representative, Alex Beaton, into the production team to oversee the finances of the project. At the same time, the BBC decided they wanted to pursue casting Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor, denying Fox's choice of Sting. Yes, that Sting. What a surreal timeline that would have been. Amblin Entertainment had gone through an upheaval due to Spielberg founding DreamWorks in 1994. This meant that Amblin was now no longer directly involved with the Doctor Who movie. Segal soon left Amblin to form Lakeshore Television, a production company affiliated with Paramount. As a parting gift, Spielberg allowed Segal to take Doctor Who with him for free, and Segal chose to work on the production through Alex Beaton and Universal. Around the time Jacobs delivered his next draft on September 18th, a number of key crew members started to join the project. The most notable of these was first choice director Jeffrey Sachs. Because of Canadian regulations, the rest of the crew had to come from the country, such as production designer Richard Houdoulin, who created the incredibly detailed Jules Verne-inspired TARDIS for the movie. The film was now planned to air on Fox in mid-May of 1996. This meant that there would be high expectations because it was one of the key periods in which ratings determined advertising rates for the next financial quarter. The film looked to finally be going into actual production, since both Fox and Universal had approved the script, leaving just the BBC as the only holdout. Hoping to avoid further delays, Segal arranged a meeting between Jacobs and BBC head of serials Michael Waring on October the 6th. This meeting changed the script significantly, introducing lasting changes such as the Doctor transporting the Master's remains to Gallifrey, and Jacobs' next script added the Master being tried and executed by the Daleks, satisfying the BBC's demands to include the iconic villains in some capacity. The script was nearing completion, but yet more issues were rearing their ugly heads. Segal was struggling with Universal, who were becoming uncomfortable with its share of the $5 million budget. Fox was expected to front $2.5 million, the BBC $300,000, and the Universal and BBC Worldwide were supposed to contribute a combined $2.2 million. Segal was ready to give Universal an ultimatum. Either they commit fully to the project, or release Segal and allow him to search for another production partner. But then something bizarre happened. On November 6th, Doctor Who forums were suddenly flooded with messages allegedly from Segal himself. These messages suggested that Universal had placed the project in jeopardy with their reluctance to spend. The messages begged fans to bombard Universal with letters and calls, and the poster even released the telephone number of Universal President Tom Thayer. Rather expectedly from Doctor Who fans, Thayer's office was brought to a standstill, with calls and messages flooding in from every side, despite a Universal employee protesting that everything had been a misunderstanding and that the project was still underway. On November 27th, 1995, the deal was finally done. After 6 years of trying to bring Doctor Who to the United States, Segal had finally managed to make it happen, but it was now time to once again deal with the problem of casting the film. Fortunately, Sylvester McCoy had already agreed to reprise his role as the 7th Doctor, determined to hand off to a successor in the proper fashion. But the identity of that successor remained undecided. Fox was still not convinced with the choice of Paul McGann, so Segal offered to cast a well-known name as the Master as a compromise. The network finally agreed, with McGann joining the project in late December. In search of his big-name Master, Segal approached Christopher Lloyd, but the deal fell through due to Lloyd's high fees. Another huge list was cultivated, including names such as Dan Aykroyd, David Bowie, Steve Buscemi, Chevy Chase, Tim Curry, Jonathan Frakes, Jeff Goldblum, Mick Jagger, Bill Murray, and Kevin Spacey. An offer was also extended to Sting, because why not? In the end, Universal chose Eric Roberts, brother of Julia Roberts and the king of schlock. TV actress Daphne Ashbrook was then cast as Grace Holloway, completing the casting of the 3 main leads. Despite things starting to move quickly and principal photography approaching, there was still a lot to deal with. The film was originally supposed to have a 30-day shoot, but Beaton cut this down to 25 days in order to save money lost on the rights to the iconic Doctor Who theme music, which wasn't even owned by the BBC. To add to the production's woes, McGann showed up to British Columbia with a haircut that was nothing like the one he had for his audition, meaning a wig had to be quickly made. And quickly made it was. The film began shooting in early January 1996. When Eric Roberts joined the filming, he discovered that the Master's outfit was too restrictive and he was uncomfortable with both the serpentine contact lenses and prosthetics he was supposed to wear. This meant that the intended slow disintegration of the Master's body could no longer take place. The perfectly logical alternative to this issue was to make him look like Terminator. Even after the film was finished, Segal continued to carry a production curse. Since so many people had come and gone, Segal now had to deal with people claiming credit for work earlier on in the project. John and Ross Hubbard were credited for first bringing McGann to Segal's attention, but John Leakley was not granted a producer credit due to almost none of his work remaining in the movie.
Doctor Who, a world premiere coming Tuesday, May 14th to Fox.
It was finally Judgment Day for the Doctor Who movie. On Tuesday, May 14th, the movie was screened on Fox at 8 PM Eastern Standard Time. So, after wading through development hell for 7 whole years, Doctor Who America Edition was finally ready for the world to see. So, how did it do? Well, it bombed hard. The movie went head to head with a dramatic episode of Roseanne. Doctor Who received a measly 5.5 million viewers in America, having a 9% audience share. This was disastrous, as Segal had been hoping for a 17 or 18% share in order to remotely interest Fox in a potential series or even more movies. It was soon clear that Fox would not be greenlighting any kind of Doctor Who project. Indeed, when Fox announced their autumn 1996 schedule, Doctor Who was glaringly absent. The movie was actually pretty successful in the UK. Despite being heavily edited due to a recent school shooting in Dunblane, Scotland, it was watched by around 9 million viewers, although this was still 2 or 3 million short of the BBC's goal. even if it had reached the right viewing figures. The BBC had no production partner, so they essentially ended up right back at where they were when they cancelled Doctor Who in 1989. Universal's licence for the Doctor Who IP was due to expire at the end of 1996, but the BBC gave them an extension into 1997. Fox was completely out of the picture by now, and Universal found no luck bringing any other companies or networks to Doctor Who, so they let the licence run out. Besides Stephen Moffat's 1999 comic relief sketch, Doctor Who would remain off people's TV screens until 2005. At the start of 1997, Jean-Marc and Randy L'Officier released the book The Nth Doctor. This book was about the history of multiple failed Doctor Who movies and featured a lot of the production material Segal had given them during production of the 1996 movie. This rightfully soured the relationship between Segal and the L'Officiers because it was used without Segal's knowledge or consent. In 1998, Segal tried to negotiate with the BBC over the rights to remake the two 60s Dalek feature films. However, this was short-lived, as Segal decided there was little potential in pursuing this idea, so he dropped the plans, instead moving into producing reality TV such as Ice Road Truckers and Storage Wars, which likely granted him much more success due to the rise of reality TV shows in the 2000s and 2010s. Paul McGann would eventually return to Doctor Who in 2001, reprising his 8th Doctor role with Big Finish Productions. He would become a cornerstone of Big Finish audio plays, ironically becoming the longest serving Doctor in the show's history, despite only appearing on screen once. In 2013, he would return to the role on screen for the mini-episode Night of the Doctor, reintroducing the 8th Doctor to a whole new generation. In a way, Paul McGann was the phoenix who rose from the ashes of Segal's Doctor Who, becoming a fan favourite in a way, if only because his on-screen presence was so unfairly brief. The troubled production of the Doctor Who movie is likely due to the persistent studio involvement and selfishness of the companies involved. It's an issue that has sunk a lot of other projects. From forcing representatives into the project to minimising the budget, every company involved was trying to control the production for their own benefit. None of them seemed to be truly into the idea, so they put in the minimal amount of work because it was such a risky investment. Universal had been far more interested in making sure their sci-fi series Sliders was renewed, rather than committing to Doctor Who, since they owned Sliders completely. The BBC was determined to keep Doctor Who off screens for a while, and Fox was never prepared to truly invest in the project until it could prove it could make money. The result of these reluctant studios and the constant creative clashes was a film that didn't really appeal to anyone. It couldn't attract the new American audience, but it was too different and too American for the British fans of the series. After being in the pipeline for almost a decade, it simply couldn't live up to its hype and the expectations the company set. But in a way, it might have been a blessing in disguise, as without its failure we may never have ended up with the revival of the show that is still going strong to this day. If you are listening to this, then thank you for reaching the end of the video, and thank you for 200 subscribers. I'm going to be making a Twitter just to interact with fans and give updates and stuff, so look in the description for information about that. So thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.